The rain hammered against the tall windows of Castellanos, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, creating rivers of light that twisted and curved down the glass. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and intimate, filled with the soft murmur of conversation and the gentle clinking of wine glasses. Emma Walsh sat at a corner table, her posture perfect, her smile practiced and professional, as she listened to Richard Chen discuss his latest acquisition plans for the gallery. The Rothko would be perfect for the spring exhibition, Richard was saying, his voice animated with enthusiasm. I think we could generate significant interest from the collector's circle. Emma nodded, making mental notes, but her attention was fracturing. Something had caught her eye, a glint of silver across the dimly lit room that made her heart skip unexpectedly. She tried to focus on Richard's words, on the presentation materials spread across the white tablecloth, but her gaze kept drifting to the table near the far wall. 3 men sat there, their dark suits perfectly tailored, their presence somehow different from the other wealthy patrons filling the restaurant. They carried an air of authority that seemed to create an invisible barrier around their table. But it wasn't the men themselves that held Emma's attention. It was the necklace. The man in the center wore it openly, the silver pendant resting against his black shirt, catching the candlelight with every slight movement. Even from this distance, Emma could see the intricate Celtic knot design, the 3 interlocking circles that formed a pattern she had memorized long ago. Her breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Emma, are you all right? Richard's voice seemed to come from very far away. She blinked, forcing herself back to the present moment. Yes, I'm sorry. I thought I recognized someone. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, thin and uncertain. Richard glanced over his shoulder, following her line of sight. His expression changed subtly, a flicker of something that might have been concern or perhaps wariness. That's Marcus Donovan, he said quietly, turning back to Emma. He's somewhat of a mystery in New York circles. Philanthropist, real estate developer. His family has been in the city for generations. Emma barely heard him. Her mind was racing backward through time, to 8 years ago, to her small Brooklyn apartment on a cold October night. She had come home from work to find her door ajar, the lock broken. The apartment had been ransacked, drawers pulled open, cushions slashed, her belongings scattered across the floor like discarded trash. But the only thing missing had been the necklace, her grandmother's necklace, the last piece of Catherine Walsh she had left. The police had filed a report. They'd been sympathetic but realistic. These things rarely turn up, the officer had told her gently. Street robbery. Probably sold for drug money within hours. I'm sorry. Emma had mourned that necklace more than any of the other items stolen that night. It had been with her grandmother when she'd emigrated from Ireland in 1952, a young woman with nothing but hope and a silver pendant that her own mother had given her. Catherine had worn it every day of her life until, on her deathbed, she'd pressed it into Emma's palm with trembling fingers. This is yours now, my darling girl, she'd whispered. It's been in our family for generations. Keep it close. Remember where you come from. And Emma had. She'd worn it constantly, feeling her grandmother's presence in the cool weight of the silver against her skin, until the night it was taken. Now, impossibly, it was here, across a crowded Manhattan restaurant, around the neck of a man she'd never met. Emma, you look pale. Should we continue this another time? Richard's concern was genuine now, his hand halfway to signaling for the waiter. She shook her head, trying to gather her composure. No, I'm fine. Just give me one moment, please. Before she could second-guess herself, before rational thought could stop her, Emma pushed back her chair and stood. The walk across the restaurant felt endless. Her heels clicked against the polished hardwood floor, each step echoing in her ears above the ambient noise. The 2 men flanking Marcus Donovan noticed her approach first. Their conversation stopped abruptly, their postures shifting in a way that suggested readiness, alertness. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with close-cropped gray hair, moved his hand slightly toward his jacket, but Marcus Donovan himself didn't turn. Not immediately. He continued cutting into his steak with precise, unhurried movements, as if he'd expected her approach, as if he'd been waiting for this moment all evening. When he finally looked up at her, Emma's breath caught again. He was younger than she'd expected, late 30s perhaps, with dark hair swept back from a strong-featured face. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, intelligent and measuring. There was something about his expression, a kind of contained intensity, that made her feel simultaneously exposed and strangely safe. Excuse me. Her voice was steadier than she felt. I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner, but I need to ask you something. The 2 other men tensed visibly. The one with gray hair started to stand, but Marcus raised one hand slightly, a subtle gesture that stopped him mid-motion. It's all right, Vincent. His voice was deep, cultured, with just a trace of a New York accent smoothed by expensive education. He studied Emma for a long moment before speaking again. "How can I help you, Miss Walsh?" "Emma Walsh." She swallowed hard, her eyes dropping to the necklace. This close, there was no doubt. It was identical in every detail. The triple knot, the slight imperfection in the lower left circle where the silver had been worked just a fraction unevenly by hand. "That necklace you're wearing, where did you get it?" Something flickered across Marcus Donovan's face, too quick for her to identify. Surprise? Recognition? Interest? He reached up slowly, his fingers touching the pendant as if he'd forgotten he was wearing it. "This?" His tone was carefully neutral. "It's been in my possession for some time." "Why do you ask?" "Because it's mine." The words came out more forcefully than she'd intended. Or it was. "It was stolen from me 8 years ago. It belonged to my grandmother." The silence that fell over the table was absolute. Vincent and the other man exchanged glances. Marcus Donovan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A sharpening, a new intensity of focus. He set down his knife and fork with deliberate care, then reached for his wine glass, taking a slow sip before responding. "That's a remarkable claim." He wasn't dismissive, but he wasn't agreeing either. "This necklace has a very specific history. I can assure you, Miss Walsh, that it didn't come from a robbery." "Then why do you have my necklace?" Emma demanded, her voice rising slightly. A few nearby diners were beginning to notice the exchange. She forced herself to lower her volume, but couldn't diminish the urgency in her tone. "I'm not mistaken. Look, there's an imperfection right there, in the lower left circle. My grandmother told me it was because the craftsman's hand slipped slightly when he was making it. She said it made it unique, one of a kind." Marcus's fingers tightened imperceptibly around his wineglass. He studied her face for a long moment, and Emma had the unsettling sensation that he was looking through her, past her surface to something deeper. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting into something that might have been resignation, or perhaps a dark amusement. "Vincent, Tony, give us a moment." The command was quiet, but absolute. The two men hesitated for only a second before standing and moving to a nearby table, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to provide privacy. Marcus gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Please, sit down, Miss Walsh. This conversation deserves more than a public confrontation." Emma hesitated. Every instinct told her this man was dangerous, that the way his companions had moved, the way other diners seemed to give his table unconscious deference, suggested power of a kind she'd never encountered. But her need for answers overwhelmed her caution. She sat, perching on the edge of the chair, her back straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Marcus turned to face her fully, and up close, Emma could see details she'd missed from across the room. Fine lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested either laughter or concern, a small scar near his left temple, barely visible, and something in his expression, a sadness perhaps, or a weariness that contradicted his otherwise commanding presence. "You're right about the imperfection," he said quietly. "It's what makes this particular piece distinctive." He paused, his fingers returning to the pendant, touching it with an odd gentleness. "But I need you to understand something, Miss Walsh. This necklace didn't come from a robbery, it came from my wife." Emma's confusion must have shown on her face because Marcus continued, his voice taking on a different quality, softer, more personal, touched with an emotion that sounded like grief. "Her name was Sophia Romano. This was hers. She wore it every day for as long as I knew her." He was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "It was my wife's." The words hung in the air between them, creating more questions than they answered. Emma's mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was telling her. "I don't understand. How can that be? My grandmother gave me this exact necklace. I wore it for years until it was stolen." "When was your grandmother born?" Marcus asked suddenly. 1934. In Ireland, County Cork. She came to America in 1952. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or the confirmation of a suspicion. He reached into his jacket pocket and Emma tensed instinctively, but he only withdrew a slim leather wallet. From it he produced a small photograph, edges worn soft with handling. He placed it on the table between them. Emma picked it up with trembling fingers. The photograph showed a woman, dark-haired and beautiful, laughing at the camera. Around her neck was the necklace. Unmistakably the same necklace. The photo was clearly old, the colors slightly faded, the style of the woman's clothing suggesting it had been taken 15 or 20 years ago. "That's Sophia," Marcus said. "Taken about 15 years ago. 2 years before she died." Emma's throat tightened. "She died? I'm so sorry, She stopped, her mind catching up to the implications. "But that doesn't make sense. If she died 15 years ago, and my necklace was stolen 8 years ago, how indeed?" Marcus took the photograph back, looking at it for a moment before returning it to his wallet with obvious care. "That's the question I've been trying to answer for the past 8 years, Miss Walsh. Because you see, Sophia was buried wearing this necklace. It should be with her still in her grave in Queens." The shock of his words hit Emma like cold water. "Then how?" 8 years ago I received a call from the NYPD. They'd recovered some items from a robbery in Brooklyn. Among them was this necklace. They'd traced it through their evidence system, found records showing it matched the description of a piece stolen from Sophia's grave 2 years after her death. He paused, his jaw tightening. Grave robbery is more common than people think, unfortunately. Jewelry, usually. They caught the man who did it. He's serving time upstate. But the necklace ended up in another robbery. Your robbery. Before being recovered again. Emma's head was spinning, but that still doesn't explain why it's identical to my grandmother's necklace. I have photographs of her wearing it decades before your wife was even born. I know. Marcus's voice was grim. Believe me, I've spent considerable time and resources trying to understand this. Because according to my family records, this necklace was made in Ireland in the 1950s. It was a Romano family heirloom, brought over by Sophia's grandmother when she emigrated. The restaurant noise seemed to fade around them. Emma felt as if she were standing at the edge of something vast and dark, a chasm of hidden history that she'd stumbled upon by pure chance. My grandmother was from County Cork, she said slowly. She came over in 1952. She said the necklace was made by a craftsman in her village. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his intensity focused entirely on her now. What was your grandmother's maiden name? O'Sullivan. Catherine O'Sullivan. Something passed over Marcus's face. Recognition, confirmation, perhaps vindication. Sophia's grandmother's maiden name was Rosa O'Sullivan, also from County Cork, also emigrated in 1952. He let the information settle between them. I think, Miss Walsh, that we need to have a much longer conversation than a restaurant setting allows. Emma's heart was pounding. Part of her wanted to run, to retreat to her safe, predictable life where the past stayed buried and silver necklaces didn't create impossible connections between strangers. But a larger part, the part that had inherited Catherine Walsh's stubborn Irish determination, needed answers. What are you suggesting? She asked. Marcus reached into his pocket again, this time producing a business card. He wrote something on the back before handing it to her. Come to this address tomorrow, 2 p.m. Bring any photographs or documents you have about your grandmother and the necklace. I'll share everything I have as well. He paused, his gray-green eyes meeting hers with an intensity that was almost physical. I think our family's histories are connected in ways neither of us fully understands, and I think it's time we found out how. Emma took the card, her fingers brushing his briefly. The address was in Tribeca, an expensive neighborhood by any standard. Why should I trust you? I don't even know who you really are. A ghost of a smile touched Marcus's lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. You shouldn't trust me, not yet, but you need answers as much as I do, maybe more. He stood, and his companions immediately rose as well, moving back toward the table with practiced efficiency. 2 p.m. tomorrow, Miss Walsh. I promise you, whatever we discover, you'll be safe. Emma stood as well, clutching the card. And if I don't come, then you'll spend the rest of your life wondering about that necklace around your grandmother's neck in those old photographs, wondering why it looks identical to one that should be impossible, wondering what secrets she never told you. His voice was gentle but relentless. I don't think you're the kind of person who can live with that. He was right, and they both knew it. Emma nodded once, unable to trust her voice, and turned away. The walk back to her table felt different from the walk over, longer, weighted with the knowledge that her life had just shifted on its axis in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Richard stood as she approached, concern evident on his face. Emma, what was that about? Are you in some kind of trouble? I'm not sure, she admitted, gathering her purse and coat. Richard, I'm so sorry, but I need to go. Can we reschedule our discussion? Of course, of course. He was already signaling for the check. Are you sure you're all right? That man, Donovan, Emma, his family has a reputation. Old New York power. The kind that doesn't always operate in the light. If you need help, I'll be fine, she assured him, though she wasn't certain she believed it herself. Thank you for understanding. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist. Emma stood on the sidewalk, letting the cool moisture settle on her face, trying to process everything that had just happened. She looked down at the card in her hand, reading the address by the streetlight's glow. Then she pulled out her phone and began typing a message to her mother. Mom, do you have any of Grandma Catherine's old letters or documents? Anything about her life in Ireland or when she first came to America? I need to see them. The response came quickly. It's late, sweetheart. Is everything okay? Emma hesitated, then typed back, everything's fine, just working on a project. Can I come by this weekend? Of course, I'll pull out the boxes from the attic, love you. Emma hailed a cab and gave her Brooklyn address. As the city blurred past the rain-streaked windows, she pulled up her photo app and scrolled back through years of images until she found what she was looking for, a photograph of a photograph taken at her grandmother's funeral. In it, young Emma, barely 20 years old, wore a black dress and a silver necklace with 3 interlocking circles. She zoomed in on the pendant, studying every detail, the triple Celtic knot, the imperfection in the lower left circle. It was identical to the one Marcus Donovan had worn tonight. Impossible, but true. Emma's reflection stared back at her from the cab window, ghost-like against the passing lights. Who was Marcus Donovan really? What had happened to his wife Sophia? And how were 2 families separated by an ocean and decades, connected by identical necklaces that should never have existed in duplicate? Tomorrow at 2 p.m. she would begin to find out. The thought filled her with equal parts dread and anticipation. She touched her throat, where her grandmother's necklace had once rested, feeling its absence like a phantom limb. "Almost home, miss," the cab driver said, pulling her from her thoughts. "Thank you," Emma murmured, but as she paid and stepped out onto her familiar street, looking up at her apartment building, she had the strangest sensation that home had just become a much more complicated concept. Somewhere in Manhattan, Marcus Donovan was probably thinking the same thing, and somewhere in the past, in a small village in County Cork, Ireland, two sisters named Catherine and Rosa O'Sullivan might have known secrets that their granddaughters were only now beginning to uncover. The necklace was the key. Emma was certain of that now. Tomorrow she would turn that key and see what doors it opened, even if what lay beyond frightened her more than she wanted to admit. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, already planning what questions to ask, what information to gather. Sleep would be difficult tonight, her mind too full of connections and mysteries. But one thing was clear. Her grandmother's necklace had just stopped being a simple piece of stolen jewelry and had become something far more significant. A bridge between past and present, between families and secrets, between the woman she'd thought she knew and the grandmother who might have hidden more than Emma had ever imagined. Emma stood on the sidewalk outside the Tribeca building, staring up at the modern glass and steel structure that seemed to pierce the gray November sky. The address Marcus Donovan had given her led to one of the neighborhood's most exclusive residential towers, the kind of place where doormen wore tailored suits, and privacy was purchased at astronomical prices. She checked her phone, 1:58 p.m. Her hand trembled slightly as she slipped it back into her coat pocket. The past 18 hours had been a blur of restless sleep and feverish research. She'd spent half the night searching for information about Marcus Donovan online, finding surprisingly little for someone who supposedly wielded such influence. There were photos from charity galas, brief mentions in business journals about real estate developments, a few society page appearances, but nothing substantial, nothing that explained the whispers Richard had alluded to, the reputation that preceded him. What she had found in abundance were photographs of Sophia Romano Donovan. Beautiful, dark-haired, always smiling at the camera with a warmth that seemed genuine. There were pictures from their wedding 15 years ago, images of her at various charitable events, and then nothing. The trail went cold 10 years ago, just as Marcus had said. In her bag, Emma carried a folder containing everything she'd managed to gather about her grandmother. Photocopies of Catherine's immigration papers from 1952, a faded birth certificate from County Cork, 3 letters Catherine had written to a friend back in Ireland during her first year in America, and most importantly, 5 photographs spanning decades, each showing Catherine wearing the silver Celtic knot necklace. "Miss Walsh?" A voice pulled her from her thoughts. The doorman had stepped outside, his expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Donovan is expecting you. Please come in." The lobby was minimalist elegance. White marble, carefully placed modern art, a single orchid arrangement on a pedestal that probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent. The doorman guided her to a private elevator that required a key card to operate. "Penthouse level," he said, swiping the card. "Mr. Donovan will meet you there." The elevator rose smoothly, silently, counting off floors and glowing numbers. Emma's reflection in the polished steel doors looked pale, her blue eyes wider than usual, her auburn hair pulled back in a professional bun that suddenly felt too severe. She dressed carefully that morning. Tailored gray slacks, a cream blouse, low heels, wanting to look composed, in control, even though inside she felt anything but. The elevator doors opened directly into Marcus Donovan's penthouse. Emma stepped out into a vast open space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the Hudson River and the Manhattan skyline. The afternoon light, filtered through clouds, cast everything in shades of silver and gray. The furnishings were expensive but understated. Dark leather, clean lines. Nothing ostentatious. Art on the walls that Emma's trained eye recognized as significant. A small Rothko, what might be an early Basquiat, a photograph by Cindy Sherman. "Miss Walsh, thank you for coming." Marcus emerged from what appeared to be a study off the main room. He wore dark slacks and a charcoal sweater, more casual than the suit from last night, but no less commanding. The necklace was no longer visible, though Emma found her eyes searching for it automatically. "Please have a seat. Can I offer you something? Coffee, tea, water?" "Tea would be nice. Thank you." Emma moved toward the seating area, choosing a leather armchair that faced both Marcus and the windows. She needed to see his expressions clearly, and the view provided a strange sort of comfort, a reminder that the normal world still existed outside this increasingly surreal situation. Marcus moved to a sleek kitchen area, his movements efficient and practiced. "I hope you don't mind that we're meeting here rather than my office. This conversation requires privacy, and I thought you might be more comfortable in a less formal setting." He returned moments later with a tray bearing a teapot, 2 cups, and a plate of biscuits. "My housekeeper is off today. You're perfectly safe, I assure you." The comment was pointed enough that Emma realized he understood her potential concerns. A woman alone in a strange man's apartment, A man with connections to power she didn't fully understand. I appreciate that, she said carefully, though I should mention several people know where I am. A slight smile touched Marcus's lips. Sensible. He poured tea for them both, the domestic gesture oddly at odds with his reputation. Did you bring the materials you mentioned? Emma set her folder on the coffee table between them. Everything I could find. My mother is going through more boxes this weekend, but this is what I have for now. She watched as Marcus opened the folder, his expression intent as he studied the first photograph. Young Catherine Walsh, perhaps 25 years old, standing in front of a Brooklyn brownstone, the necklace clearly visible at her throat. 1955, Marcus read from the notation on the back, 3 years after she arrived. He looked at the next photo, then the next, his fingers careful with the aged paper. When he reached the immigration documents, he paused, reading them thoroughly. She came over alone? No family with her? Her parents had died in the late 1940s. She had siblings, but they'd scattered. Some to England, some to Australia. America was her fresh start. Emma sipped her tea, watching him process the information. The letters mention a sister, Rosa. She writes about missing her, about hoping they'll reunite someday. Marcus's head snapped up. May I see those letters? Emma handed them over, noting the tension that had entered his posture. He read quickly, his jaw tightening as he progressed through the pages. When he finished, he set them down carefully and stood, moving to the windows. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared out at the gray river and the industrial landscape of New Jersey beyond. Sophia's grandmother was named Rosa O'Sullivan, he finally said, his voice quiet. She came to New York in 1952, just like your grandmother. She settled in Little Italy, married Antonio Romano within a year. Sophia grew up hearing stories about Rosa's sister Catherine, about how they'd been separated when they left Ireland, about how Rosa always regretted losing touch. He turned back to Emma. She told Sophia that Catherine had moved to Brooklyn, that she'd tried to find her but never could. Emma felt the pieces beginning to align, creating a picture she didn't yet fully understand. So they were sisters, Catherine and Rosa. That explains the identical necklaces. They must have been made as a pair, gifts from their mother or grandmother perhaps. That was my conclusion as well. Marcus returned to his seat, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. But it doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain why the families never reconnected. New York isn't that large. The Irish community in the 1950s was tight-knit. How did two sisters lose each other completely? Your family would have known, Emma said carefully. The Romanos. If Rosa was looking for Catherine, surely she would have asked them to help. Something dark passed across Marcus's face. The Romano family in the 1950s and 60s was complicated. Sophia's grandfather, Antonio, was connected. You understand what I'm saying? He waited for Emma's nod. The family was involved in various enterprises. Not all of them legal. By the time I knew them, things had changed. Legitimized mostly. But back then, they had their hands in everything from construction to waste management to protection rackets. Emma's throat felt tight. And my grandmother's family? I don't know. That's what I've been trying to find out. Marcus stood again, unable to remain still. After I got the necklace back from the police 8 years ago, after I confirmed it was the same one Sophia wore, the one from her grandmother Rosa, I started investigating. I hired private investigators. Researchers. I wanted to know how it ended up stolen from Sophia's grave, how it connected to your grandmother, why there were two identical pieces. He moved to his study and returned with a thick file folder, setting it on the coffee table. This is everything I've found. Immigration records for both Catherine and Rosa, marriage certificates, property records, and this. He pulled out a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, dated July 1965. The headline read, "Brooklyn Man Killed in Shooting." Emma took the clipping with shaking hands. The article was brief, typical of the era's reporting on such incidents. James Walsh, 42, was killed last night outside his Brooklyn home in what police believe was gang-related violence. Walsh, a dock worker, leaves behind a wife, Catherine, and 2 young daughters. Police have no suspects at this time. Your grandfather, Marcus said softly. Emma nodded, unable to speak. She'd known her grandfather had died when her mother was young, that it had been violent, but her grandmother had never discussed the details. My mother was 7 when it happened. She barely remembers him. Grandma Catherine raised them alone, worked as a seamstress, and cleaned houses to make ends meet. The shooting happened in disputed territory, Marcus continued. 1965 was a volatile time. Various families were fighting over control of the Brooklyn docks. According to my investigators, your grandfather wasn't involved in anything criminal. He was just a working man in the wrong place at the wrong time. Crossfire from a dispute between the Romano family and another group. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Your wife's family killed my grandfather. Maybe, probably. Marcus's voice was strained. But Emma, you have to understand. It wasn't personal. It was the chaos of that era. The violence that infected everything. My investigators found evidence suggesting your grandfather witnessed something related to dock operations. He was killed to ensure his silence, but No one in the Romano family even knew he was Catherine O'Sullivan's husband. By then, the sisters had already lost touch. The connection was never made. Emma stood abruptly, moving away from him, her arms wrapped around herself. Through the windows, she could see a boat making its way up the Hudson, small and insignificant against the vast gray water. So my grandmother spent 30 years not knowing that her sister's family, that the Romanos, were responsible for making her a widow, for orphaning her daughters. I don't think she ever knew. If she had, surely she would have. Marcus trailed off, seeming to realize there was no good way to finish that sentence. Would have what? Sought revenge? Gone to the police? Emma laughed. A bitter sound. She was an immigrant woman with 2 small children and no resources. What could she have done? She turned back to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Did Sophia know? Marcus's expression grew even more somber. I think she was starting to piece it together. In the months before she died, Sophia became interested in her grandmother's history. She was pregnant with our first child, thinking about family, heritage, what we'd passed down. She started researching, asking questions of the older generation. Her grandmother Rosa had died years before, but there were cousins, great aunts. Sophia was gathering stories, documents. He moved to a bookshelf and pulled down a leather-bound journal, bringing it back to Emma. This was Sophia's. I found it after the accident. She'd been documenting everything she learned about Rosa, about the early days in New York. Look at the last entry. Emma opened the journal to the marked page. Sophia's handwriting was elegant, flowing. The entry was dated 2 weeks before her death. Grandmother Rosa never stopped looking for Catherine. Asked Uncle Vincent, must have been before he died in 1998, if he knew anything about Catherine Walsh in Brooklyn. He became angry, told her to stop asking questions about the past. Why? What happened between the families? The necklaces were supposed to keep them connected. Mama said the knot design meant sisters forever, but something broke that bond. Need to find out what. She was investigating, Emma said slowly. And then she died in a car accident. The brakes failed on her BMW. She went off the road on the Taconic Parkway, hit a tree. The investigators ruled it mechanical failure, possibly a manufacturing defect. She died instantly. Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless, but Emma could hear the pain underneath. I accepted that explanation for years. What else could I do? I was drowning in grief, and I had no reason to suspect anything else. But now you do. Now I wonder. Marcus took the journal back, closing it carefully. Uncle Vincent died 3 years before Sophia, but there were others in the family, older members who might have remembered things from the 1960s. Who might have known about James Walsh's death and the connection to Catherine O'Sullivan. If Sophia was asking the wrong questions, if someone thought she was going to expose family secrets. Emma sank back into her chair, her mind reeling. You think your own family killed her? I don't know. I've spent 10 years not knowing, and it's been slowly destroying me. Marcus sat across from her again, and for the first time, Emma saw past his controlled exterior to the grief and anger beneath. The necklace disappeared from the accident scene. It should have been with her body, but it wasn't. That always bothered me. Then 8 years ago, it turns up in a police evidence locker, connected to a grave robbery, and then to your burglary. Someone went to significant effort to make sure that necklace stayed hidden, stayed separated from the family. Until you got it back, Emma said. Until I got it back, and started asking questions again. The same questions Sophia had asked. He met her eyes directly. That's why I needed to meet you. When you approached me last night, when you said the necklace was yours, from your grandmother Catherine, I knew the universe or fate or whatever you want to call it had just given me the missing piece. Emma's hands trembled as she set down her teacup. What are you asking me to do? Help me find the truth about our grandmothers, about what really happened to your grandfather, about why the families were separated, and about Sophia. His voice dropped. I need to know if my wife died because she was trying to reconnect the bonds those necklaces represented. The enormity of what he was proposing settled over Emma like a weight. This wasn't just historical curiosity anymore. This was potentially dangerous. Digging into old family secrets. Organized crime, possibly murder. She thought about her quiet life, her gallery job, her safe apartment in Brooklyn. She thought about how much easier it would be to walk away, to let the past stay buried. But she also thought about her grandmother Catherine, who'd worn that necklace every day, who'd held Emma's hand and told her stories about County Cork, about stone walls and green hills and a sister she'd loved and lost. She thought about Sophia, a woman she'd never met, who died trying to answer the same questions that now burned in Emma's mind. I'll help you, she heard herself say, but I need you to promise me something. Name it. If we discover things about your family, things that are criminal or dangerous, I won't be part of covering them up. I'm not asking you to turn in your own relatives, but I won't be complicit in hiding violence or corruption. Marcus studied her for a long moment, and Emma had the sense he was measuring her. deciding if she could be trusted. Finally, he nodded. I can agree to that. I've spent most of my adult life trying to move my family's operations into legitimate business. I have no interest in protecting the sins of the past. I just want the truth. Then we have an agreement. Emma extended her hand, and Marcus shook it, his grip firm and warm. I've already taken the liberty of hiring someone, Marcus said, releasing her hand. Daniel Chen, a private investigator who specializes in family histories and cold cases. He's been working on this for the past week. Since the night you confronted me, yes, I started investigating immediately. He's supposed to call today with an initial report. As if summoned by his words, Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and then at Emma. It's him. May I? At Emma's nod, he answered. Daniel, yes, she's here with me. You're on speaker. He set the phone on the coffee table between them. Mr. Donovan, Miss Walsh. The voice was crisp, professional. I have some preliminary findings that I think you both need to hear. I've been going through property records, financial documents, and police reports from the 1960s. The picture that's emerging is complicated. Go on, Marcus said. First, Catherine Walsh knew exactly who killed her husband. There are police statements from neighbors indicating she was visited by two men in suits 3 days after James Walsh's death. She was seen leaving with them, returning hours later. After that, she withdrew her cooperation with the police investigation, refused to answer questions, said she didn't want to pursue it further. Emma's breath caught. She knew. And more than that, someone paid off her mortgage 3 months later. A significant amount of money appeared in her bank account, enough to cover the mortgage and provide living expenses for nearly 2 years. The transfer was arranged through a series of shell companies, but I've traced them back to a real estate firm that was a known Romano family front. Marcus leaned forward. They paid her off. Blood money? It appears so. But here's where it gets interesting. That same month, Rosa O'Sullivan Romano made a substantial withdrawal from her personal account, $10,000, which in 1965 was a fortune. I can't prove it definitively, but the timing suggests she was the source of the payment to Catherine. Emma's mind raced. Rosa found out. She discovered that her husband's family had killed her sister's husband, and she tried to make it right. She sent money. That's my theory, Daniel said. But it didn't bring the sisters back together. In fact, after 1965, there's no evidence they ever had contact again. Catherine stayed in Brooklyn, raised her daughters, worked hard, kept her head down. Rosa remained in the Romano family sphere, raised Sophia's mother, lived a very different life. The necklaces were the only connection that remained, until Sophia started asking questions, Marcus said quietly. Yes, I've been interviewing people who knew Sophia, colleagues from her charity work, family friends. Several mentioned that in the months before her death, she'd become somewhat obsessed with family history. One friend said Sophia had mentioned finding something disturbing in her grandmother's papers, something about a promise that had been broken. She wouldn't elaborate. Emma and Marcus exchanged glances. A promise. The necklaces represented the bond between sisters, and that bond had been shattered by violence and complicity. There's one more thing, Daniel continued. I've located someone who was there in 1965. Someone who worked for Antonio Romano and is still alive. He's in a nursing home in Queens. Elderly. But his mind is sharp. He says he'll talk to you, Mr. Donovan. He says it's time the truth came out. Marcus's expression was unreadable. Set up a meeting. As soon as possible. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. I'll text you the address. Daniel paused. Be prepared. What he has to say may change everything you thought you knew about your family. After the call ended, silence filled the penthouse. Emma stared out at the river, watching the light change as clouds shifted overhead. Finally, she spoke. Your wife died because she was trying to heal an old wound. She was trying to reconnect the sisters, even though they were both gone. And someone in my family couldn't let that happen. Couldn't let the truth about James Walsh's murder come to light. Marcus stood, moving to the windows, his back to Emma. I've spent 10 years mourning Sophia, missing her, trying to move forward. And all this time, someone in my own family may have taken her from me deliberately. Emma joined him at the windows, standing beside him, looking out at the city that had witnessed all of this. The arrival of two young Irish sisters, full of hope, the violence that tore them apart, the silence that followed, and now finally the reckoning. We'll find out who, she said. We'll get answers for Sophia, for Catherine, for all of them. Marcus turned to look at her, and in his eyes, Emma saw a reflection of her own determination, her own need for justice. Tomorrow, then, we'll hear what this man has to say, and we'll follow the truth wherever it leads. Wherever it leads, Emma agreed. As she left the penthouse an hour later, armed with copies of Marcus's files and a renewed sense of purpose, Emma realized that her life had irrevocably changed. The simple act of recognizing a necklace in a restaurant had set in motion a chain of events that was now unstoppable. She was connected to Marcus Donovan now, bound by shared history and the ghosts of women who'd worn silver Celtic knots and believed in promises that should never be broken. Tomorrow, they would take another step into the past, and Emma had the growing certainty that whatever they discovered in that nursing home would be only the beginning of a much deeper, more dangerous truth. The Sunrise Senior Living Facility in Queens sat tucked between a bodega and a laundromat, its brick facade weathered by decades of New York winters. Emma stood beside Marcus's black Mercedes, her breath forming small clouds in the cold morning air. She'd barely slept, her mind churning through everything Daniel Chen had told them, through all the implications of what they might learn today. Marcus emerged from the driver's side, his expression grim. He wore a dark overcoat over a charcoal suit, every inch the powerful businessman, but Emma had learned to read the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Vincent, his security man, had followed in a separate car and now stood a discreet distance away, ever watchful. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked, his voice low. Emma nodded, though she wasn't sure she was ready for anything anymore. In the past 48 hours, her entire understanding of her family history had been shattered and rebuilt into something darker, more complex. "Let's find out what he knows." The facility's interior smelled of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. A tired-looking nurse directed them to the third floor, room 314. "Mr. Castellano is expecting you," she said. "He's been quite alert this morning, talking about the old days. Please don't tire him too much." Room 314 was small but clean, with a window overlooking the street below. The man in the hospital bed was ancient, his skin paper-thin, liver-spotted hands resting on the white blanket, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, tracking their entrance with interest. "Marcus Donovan," the old man said, his voice surprisingly strong despite his frail appearance. "You look like your grandfather." Anthony had that same bearing, that same way of carrying himself like he owned every room he walked into. His gaze shifted to Emma. "And who's this?" "Emma Walsh," Marcus said. "Catherine O'Sullivan's granddaughter." Something flickered in the old man's eyes. Recognition. Perhaps regret. "O'Sullivan. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. I never thought I'd see this day." He gestured weakly toward two chairs beside his bed. "Sit, sit. I'm Thomas Castellano, though everyone called me Tommy back in the day. I worked for Antonio Romano from 1958 until I retired in 1992. Saw everything. Kept my mouth shut for 60 years. But I'm 93 years old now, and I figure God will judge me soon enough. Might as well get some truth out before then." Marcus pulled the chairs closer, and they sat. Emma could feel her heart pounding. This man had been there, had witnessed the events that destroyed her grandmother's life. "Daniel Chen said you'd talk to us about 1965, Marcus prompted. "About James Walsh's death." Tommy's weathered face creased into deeper lines. "That night changed everything. But to understand it, you need to know what came before." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Rosa and Catherine O'Sullivan were inseparable when they first came to New York. Both arrived in 52. Both stayed with a cousin in the Bronx initially. Rosa met Antonio Romano at a church dance in 53. And he fell for her hard. "She was a beauty, your grandmother, Mr. Donovan. Kind, too. Had a light about her." Emma leaned forward. "And Catherine?" "Catherine was different. Tougher, maybe. She'd seen hard times in Ireland, came over with barely a penny. She moved to Brooklyn, got work in a garment factory, met James Walsh at a union meeting in 54. He was a good man, honest, worked the docks. They married quick, had their first daughter within a year." Tommy's eyes grew distant. The sisters stayed close those first few years. Rosa would take the subway to Brooklyn. Catherine would come to Little Italy. The families knew each other. "What changed?" Marcus asked. Tommy's expression darkened. "Antonio changed. Or rather, his business changed. In the late 50s, the Romano family got more involved with the docks. Protection, labor disputes, cargo that wasn't entirely legitimate. James Walsh was a union man, principled. He started noticing things. Irregularities in shipping manifests, containers that arrived and disappeared without proper documentation. Emma felt a chill. He found out about illegal activity. More than that, in early 1965 there was a big shipment coming in, something the Romano family had arranged with an Irish outfit. Weapons, I think, though I was never told details. James Walsh was working that night. Saw things he shouldn't have seen. He mentioned it to Catherine, said he was thinking about going to the police, that working men shouldn't be caught up in this kind of thing. And Catherine told Rosa, Marcus said quietly. Tommy nodded. The sisters still talked, still trusted each other. Catherine was worried about James, about what might happen if he reported what he'd seen. Rosa promised she'd talk to Antonio, make sure James was protected, that the family would leave him alone. He paused, his breathing labored, but Antonio saw it differently. He saw a threat that needed to be eliminated. He didn't tell Rosa what he planned. None of us did. The room felt suffocating. Emma's hands clenched in her lap. So they killed him. Not the family directly. Antonio contracted it out to another crew, the O'Donnells. Made it look like territorial violence. July 15th, 1965. James was walking home from his shift. 2 men in a car. 3 shots. He died on the sidewalk 2 blocks from his house. Tommy's voice cracked. I was there, not pulling the trigger but driving one of the follow cars. making sure everything went smooth. I was 28 years old and thought I was doing my job. I've had 43 years to regret it. Tears burned Emma's eyes. Her grandfather, murdered by the family her grandmother's sister had married into. The betrayal was staggering. Rosa found out 3 days later. Tommy continued. She overheard Antonio talking to his brother. She went crazy, screaming, crying, saying he'd betrayed her, destroyed her sister's life. Antonio told her it was business, that she needed to understand the family came first, but Rosa couldn't accept it. She demanded to see Catherine, to explain, to apologize. And did she? Emma whispered. Antonio wouldn't allow it at first, but Rosa was stubborn. She threatened to go to the police herself if he didn't let her make it right, so they arranged a meeting, the one the neighbors saw. Rosa went with 2 of Antonio's men to Catherine's apartment. She told Catherine everything, what James had seen, why he'd been killed, that she'd tried to prevent it but failed. Marcus spoke carefully, and Catherine accepted blood money to keep quiet. Tommy shook his head. It wasn't like that, not entirely. Catherine didn't want the money, but Rosa begged her to take it, said it was all she could do, that she'd never forgive herself if Catherine and the little girls ended up on the street. She took money from her own account, not family money, and had it sent through shell companies so Antonio couldn't track it back to her directly. He coughed, reaching for a glass of water. Emma helped him drink, but the price Rosa demanded was cruel in its own way. She told Catherine they could never see each other again, never speak. The connection had to be severed completely. If Antonio knew they were still in contact, if he thought Catherine might still be a threat, there'd be more violence. The only way to keep Catherine and her daughters safe was complete separation. The sisters sacrificed their relationship to protect Catherine's family, Emma said, understanding blooming like a dark flower. Rosa wore her necklace every day after that, Tommy said. She told people it reminded her of home, of Ireland, but I think it reminded her of what she'd lost. She never smiled the same way again. The light went out of her. Marcus's jaw was tight. And my family buried this for 60 years. Your grandfather Anthony knew, of course. He was Antonio's younger brother, involved in everything. When Sophia started asking questions 10 years ago, Anthony was still alive, still sharp. He would have been the one to tell the family to shut it down, to make sure she stopped digging. Tommy's gaze on Marcus was steady. I can't prove what happened to your wife, Mr. Donovan, but I can tell you that Anthony was a man who believed in protecting family secrets at any cost, and I can tell you that 2 weeks after Sophia died, he had me come to his house. He asked me if I'd ever told anyone about James Walsh. I said no, and he said good. Keep it that way. Said some stories needed to stay buried. The implication hung in the air like poison. Emma felt Marcus go rigid beside her. My grandfather had Sophia killed, Marcus said, his voice devoid of emotion, to keep her from exposing a 60-year-old murder. I can't say for certain, Tommy repeated, but I can say this. Anthony died 3 months after Sophia, and on his deathbed he confessed to a priest. My nephew was the nurse on duty, overheard some of it. Anthony said he'd done terrible things to protect the family, that he'd sacrificed innocent people. The priest gave him absolution, but my nephew said Anthony died crying, saying a woman's name over and over. He thought it was his wife's name, but Anthony's wife was named Gabriella. The name he was saying was Sophia. Marcus stood abruptly, walking to the window, his back to them. Emma could see his shoulders shaking, whether with rage or grief she couldn't tell. She stood too, approaching him carefully. Marcus, she said softly. I had Sunday dinners with him, Marcus said, his voice barely controlled. After Sophia died, I'd go to his house every week. He'd hold my hand, tell me he was sorry for my loss, that Sophia was watching over me from heaven, and all that time he knew. He'd ordered her death. Tommy spoke from the bed. Anthony loved you, Mr. Donovan. In his twisted way, he thought he was protecting you, protecting the family. Men like him, men from that generation, they didn't see the world the way we do now. Family honor, omerta, the code, it was everything. More than love, more than individual lives. It doesn't make it right, Emma said fiercely. Nothing makes it right. No, Tommy agreed. Nothing does. That's why I'm telling you now. I'm dying. Got maybe 6 months according to the doctors. I don't want to meet my maker carrying these secrets, and you two deserve to know the truth, to understand what really connected your families. Marcus turned back from the window, his face composed again but his eyes blazing. Is there anyone else still alive from that time? Anyone else who knows what happened? Most are dead. Antonio's been gone 30 years. Anthony's gone 10. But there's one person, Lucia Romano, Antonio's sister. She's 91, lives in a facility in Staten Island. She was close to Rosa, might have known things even I didn't. Tommy fumbled for a notepad on his bedside table, wrote down an address with shaking hands. She's got dementia, comes and goes, but when she's lucid, she talks about the old days. Might be worth trying. Marcus took the paper, folding it carefully. Thank you, Mr. Castellano. I know this wasn't easy. Will you? Tommy hesitated. Will you go to the police about James Walsh? Emma and Marcus exchanged glances. Everyone involved is dead, Emma said slowly. What would be the point? My grandmother chose silence to protect her daughters. I won't dishonor that choice by dragging it into the light now. And Sophia? Tommy asked, looking at Marcus. I don't know yet, Marcus Marcus admitted. I need to think. I need to. He couldn't finish the sentence. They left shortly after, emerging into the cold December morning. The city moved around them. Cars honking, people hurrying past, but Emma felt separated from it all, encased in the terrible knowledge they now carried. Vincent approached, his expression questioning. Marcus waved him back. Give us a moment. They stood on the sidewalk, Emma and Marcus, bound now by shared grief and rage. I'm sorry, Emma said finally. About Sophia, about your grandfather's betrayal. I'm sorry about yours, Marcus replied. About what my family did to him, to your grandmother. What do we do now? Marcus pulled out his phone, staring at the address Tommy had given them. We keep going. We talk to Lucia Romano. We get every piece of truth we can find. He looked at her, his gray-green eyes intense. And then I need to decide what to do with my family's empire, because I won't continue benefiting from wealth built on this kind of corruption and violence. Emma nodded. When do we go to Staten Island? Tomorrow. I'll have Daniel arrange it. He hesitated, then added, Emma, this is going to get more dangerous. There are still people in the family who won't want these stories told. People who have a vested interest in keeping the past buried. If you want to walk away. I'm not walking away, Emma interrupted. This is my history too. My grandfather. My grandmother. I need to see it through. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, gratitude mixed with concern. Then I promise you I'll keep you safe. Whatever happens, whatever we find, you'll be protected. I don't need protection. I need the truth. You'll have both. They parted ways at Emma's insistence. She had to go to work, maintain some semblance of normalcy. But as she rode the subway back to Manhattan, Emma knew that normalcy was an illusion now. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Found more of Grandma's things. Some letters I've never seen before. Come by this weekend? Emma replied. Definitely. Mom, can I ask you something? Did Grandma ever mention having a sister? The response took several minutes. No. She always said she was alone in the world when she came to America. Why? Just curious. See you Saturday. But it wasn't curiosity. It was the growing understanding that Catherine Walsh had carried her secrets to the grave, had chosen silence to protect her daughters, had worn a silver necklace every day, as the only reminder of the sister she'd loved and lost. The sister whose family had destroyed Catherine's life, then paid for her silence, then demanded she erase even the memory of their connection. Emma's hand went to her throat, where her own necklace had once rested. She'd lost it to a random thief. A senseless crime. Or had it been random? Had someone in the Romano family been watching her, aware that Catherine O'Sullivan's granddaughter wore the matching necklace? Had they orchestrated its theft to keep the connection buried? The thought sent ice through her veins. She pulled out her phone and texted Marcus. The robbery 8 years ago. Was it really random? His response was immediate. I've been wondering the same thing. Daniel's investigating. I'll call you tonight. Emma put her phone away, staring at her reflection in the subway window. Her grandmother's face looked back at her. The same auburn hair, the same blue eyes, the same stubborn jaw. Catherine Walsh had been strong enough to survive poverty, immigration, widowhood, and the terrible knowledge that her sister's family had murdered her husband. She'd raised 2 daughters alone, built a life from nothing, and never once revealed the truth. Emma didn't know if she had that kind of strength, but she was about to find out. That evening, as promised, Marcus called. Emma was in her apartment, surrounded by photographs and documents, trying to piece together the timeline of her grandmother's life. Daniel found something, Marcus said without preamble. The man who robbed your apartment in 2017. His name was Eddie Russo. He died in prison 2 years ago, stabbing in the yard, but before he was arrested for your robbery, he'd done some work for various people in the New York crime world. Daniel dug up phone records. 3 days before your apartment was broken into, Eddie received a call from a number registered to a burner phone. That phone made 3 other calls in the following week, all to numbers associated with my family's organization. Emma's apartment suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Someone hired him to steal my necklace specifically. It appears so. Someone who knew you had it, who wanted to make sure both necklaces stayed separated. Marcus paused. Emma, my security team should— No, she interrupted. I'm not living in fear, and whoever did this, they got what they wanted 8 years ago. The necklace was separated from me, until I got it back from the police. Until you saw me wearing it and started asking questions. Marcus's voice was grim. Emma, please, let Vincent assign someone to watch your apartment, at least until we understand who might still see this as a threat. She wanted to refuse, to insist on her independence. But the thought of Eddie Russo dead in a prison yard, murdered perhaps because he'd known too much, made her reconsider. Okay, but discreetly. I don't want my neighbors thinking I'm in witness protection. Done. There'll be someone outside your building starting tonight. You won't even notice them. After they hung up, Emma made tea and sat by her window, looking out at the Brooklyn street below. Somewhere in this city, someone who'd been willing to orchestrate a robbery and possibly a murder was still alive, still protecting secrets, and that someone was connected to Marcus's family. Her phone rang again, her mother this time. Sweetheart, I've been going through Grandma's trunk. There's a letter here, Emma. It's addressed to you, dated 2 weeks before she died. She never gave it to you? Emma's heart hammered. No, I never saw it. What does it say? I haven't opened it. It's sealed. Has your name on it. Should I bring it this weekend or do you want to come get it now? I'll come now, Emma said, already reaching for her coat. "I'll be there in an hour." The letter sat in Emma's hands like a live thing, her name written in her grandmother's shaky handwriting across the envelope. They were in her mother's kitchen in Sunset Park. The trunk's contents spread across the table: old photographs, immigration papers, prayer cards, and this letter. "She must have written it but never found the right time to give it to you," her mother said. "Or maybe she lost her nerve. You know how private she was about certain things." Emma's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. The letter was 3 pages, written in the labored script of someone whose hands no longer worked quite right. She began to read. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And perhaps that's for the best. There are things I should have told you while I lived, secrets I carried for too long, but I was afraid of putting you in danger, afraid of tainting your memory of me, afraid of stirring up the past. The necklace I gave you belonged to my mother, passed down through generations of O'Sullivan women, but there was another necklace, identical to yours, given to my sister Rosa. We wore them as a promise, sisters forever, no matter where life took us. When Rosa and I came to America, we believed that promise would hold. It didn't. My sister married into a family that valued power over people, that solved problems with violence. Your grandfather, James, he was a good man, Emma, better than most. He stood up for what was right, and it cost him his life. Rosa's husband's family killed him, and Rosa, my beloved sister, had to choose between justice for James and safety for me and my girls. She chose safety. She sent money, ensured we'd survive. But the price was our relationship. We never spoke again after that terrible day in 1965. I saw her only once more, at a distance, at her husband Antonio's funeral in 1987. She looked old, Emma, broken by the weight of what her choices had cost her. I wanted to go to her, to tell her I understood, that I'd forgiven her. But too much time had passed. Too much pain sat between us. I've worn this necklace every day since she gave it to me when we were girls. It's all I have left of the sister I loved, of the promise we made. Now I'm giving it to you, along with this terrible history. I don't know what you'll do with it. Maybe nothing. Maybe it's better if these stories die with my generation. But if someday you find yourself face to face with Rosa's family, know this: not all of them were monsters. Rosa herself was good, kind, trapped by circumstances and choices not her own, and maybe, somewhere, her descendants carry the same goodness. Keep the necklace close, Emma. Remember that love and loyalty can exist even in the darkest places. And forgive me for keeping these secrets so long. All my love, Grandma Catherine. Emma's tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. Her mother was crying too, reading over Emma's shoulder. "I never knew," her mother whispered. "All those years, she carried this alone. She was protecting us," Emma said, understanding flooding through her, just like Rosa protected her. They were both trying to shield the people they loved from the violence that destroyed their bond. She pulled out her phone and called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "Emma, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's—" She took a shaky breath. "I found a letter from my grandmother. Marcus, she forgave Rosa. She understood. And she says that not everyone in your family was a monster, that some of them carried goodness too." Silence on the other end. Then, Sophia would have wanted to hear that. She believed in redemption, in the possibility that people could rise above their family's sins. "So do I," Emma said softly. "That's why we're doing this. Not for revenge, but for truth. For the sisters who couldn't reconcile. For Sophia, who died trying. For all of them. Tomorrow," Marcus said, "we go to Staten Island and talk to Lucia. We get the last pieces of this story, and then we decide together how to honor the truth we've found." "Tomorrow," Emma agreed. After hanging up, she sat with her mother, going through the rest of Catherine's things, finding small treasures and memories. But her mind was already ahead, already moving toward the next revelation. The next step in a journey that had begun with a simple question: "Why do you have my necklace?" She was beginning to understand that the answer was far more complex than ownership or theft. It was about family and betrayal, love and sacrifice, sins and redemption. It was about two sisters, separated by violence and reunited now, finally, through their granddaughter's determination to uncover the truth. Outside, in a black sedan parked across the street, one of Vincent's men watched Emma's mother's building, keeping guard. And somewhere in Staten Island, an old woman with dementia waited to share the final pieces of a 60-year-old tragedy. The truth was coming, whether anyone was ready for it or not. The care facility in Staten Island sat on a hill overlooking the Narrows, where massive container ships moved slowly toward New York Harbor. Emma stood beside Marcus in the parking lot, watching the gray December water churn with whitecaps. The wind cut through her coat, making her shiver, though she wasn't sure if it was the cold or anticipation that chilled her. "Lucia may not remember anything useful," Marcus warned, as he had several times during the drive. "Daniel said her lucid moments are unpredictable. We might have made this trip for nothing, or we might get answers," Emma countered. She'd barely slept after reading her grandmother's letter, her mind replaying Catherine's words. Not all of them were monsters. Rosa herself was good, kind, trapped by circumstances and choices not her own. If that was true, perhaps Lucia Romano could shed light on Rosa's inner life, on the sister Catherine had lost. The facility's director, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Delgado, met them at the entrance. "Mr. Donovan, thank you for calling ahead. Miss Romano is having a good morning. She's been quite talkative, asking for her brother Antonio." Her expression grew sympathetic. "We don't correct her when she talks about deceased family members. It only causes distress." "We understand," Marcus said. "We just want to ask her about the past, about her sister-in-law Rosa." Mrs. Delgado led them through corridors decorated with garlands and paper snowflakes, past residents in wheelchairs and walkers, to a bright corner room. Lucia Romano sat in an armchair by the window, a crocheted blanket across her lap. She was tiny, bird-boned, with white hair pulled back in a bun, but her eyes, when they looked up, were surprisingly alert, a deep brown that held intelligence despite her condition. "Visitors?" Lucia's voice was stronger than Emma expected. "I don't get many visitors anymore. Everyone's dead." She squinted at Marcus. "Who are you?" "I'm Marcus Donovan, Mrs. Romano, Antonio's grandson." "Antonio's grandson," Lucia repeated slowly. Then her face transformed, a smile spreading across the wrinkled features. "Little Marcus, but you're not little anymore. You grew up." She reached out with a gnarled hand, and Marcus took it gently. "You look like Anthony. Your grandfather had that same serious face, always thinking, always planning." Her gaze shifted to Emma. "And who's this pretty girl?" Emma knelt beside the chair, bringing herself to eye level. "My name is Emma Walsh, Mrs. Romano. My grandmother was Catherine O'Sullivan." The change in Lucia was immediate. Her hand tightened on Marcus's and tears welled in her eyes. "Catherine, oh Catherine, Rosa's baby sister. Is she here? Did she finally come? Rosa waited so long, hoped so long." Emma's throat constricted. "No, Mrs. Romano. Catherine passed away 10 years ago, but I'm her granddaughter. I came because I want to understand what happened between the sisters, why they never reconciled." Lucia's tears spilled over, tracking down her lined cheeks. It was the men, always the men and their business, their pride, their violence. Rosa and Catherine loved each other so much. When they were girls in Cork, Rosa told me, they'd sleep in the same bed, share everything. The necklaces their mother gave them. "Did you know about the necklaces?" "Yes," Emma said softly. "I have one. Marcus has the other." Lucia looked between them, confusion flickering. "But Rosa's necklace was buried with her. I was there. I saw them put it around her neck in the casket. It was stolen," Marcus said, "but I recovered it years later." "Mrs. Romano, we need to understand what really happened in 1965. We know about James Walsh's death. We know Rosa sent Catherine money. But what happened after? Why did the sisters never speak again?" Lucia's face crumpled. For a moment, Emma thought they'd lost her to confusion, but then the old woman spoke, her voice steady but filled with ancient pain. "Rosa's heart broke that day. Not just broke, shattered. When she found out what Antonio had ordered, what they'd done to Catherine's husband, she screamed at him for hours. I heard it through the walls. She called him a murderer, said she'd never forgive him. Antonio hit her. First time ever. Told her she'd keep quiet or she'd be the one in danger." Marcus's jaw clenched, but he remained silent, letting Lucia continue. "Rosa didn't care about her own safety, but she had a daughter, little Gabriella, Sophia's mother, and Antonio made it clear if Rosa went to the police, if she caused trouble, Gabriella would pay the price. He'd send her away. Rosa would never see her again." Lucia wiped at her tears with shaking hands. "So Rosa did what she had to do. She went to Catherine, told her everything, begged her forgiveness. And Catherine, sweet Catherine, she didn't blame Rosa. She blamed Antonio, blamed the family, but she agreed to Rosa's terms. They had to stay apart to keep everyone safe. The money Rosa sent," Emma said, "that was her own, not family money. Every penny from her personal account. Money she'd saved from before the marriage. Antonio never knew. He thought the family lawyers had arranged the payoff. If he'd known Rosa did it herself with her own money." Lucia shuddered. "It doesn't matter now, but Rosa gave up everything. Her sister, her peace of mind, her happiness, to protect the people she loved. Did she ever try to contact Catherine again?" Emma asked. "Once, in 1987, when Antonio died. Rosa thought maybe, finally, she could reach out. She wrote a letter, poured her heart into it, but before she could send it, Anthony found it. He was the head of the family by then, and he was even more paranoid than his brother. He burned the letter in front of Rosa, told her the past stayed buried. That's when Rosa started to fade. She'd held on for so long, hoping someday she'd see Catherine again. When Anthony destroyed that hope, something in Rosa died too." Marcus's voice was tight. "And Sophia? 20 years later, what did she discover?" Lucia's eyes grew distant, lost in memory. "Sophia was so much like Rosa, kind, curious, determined. When she got pregnant, she wanted to know her grandmother's story, wanted to understand her heritage. She found Rosa's diary, hidden in the attic. I don't know what all was in it, but Sophia came to me with questions. She'd read about Catherine, about the sisters' separation, about James Walsh." Lucia looked directly at Marcus, her brown eyes suddenly sharp and knowing. "She asked me if Antonio had ordered James Walsh's death. I was old, Tired of lies. I told her yes. The word hung in the air like a condemnation. Sophia was horrified but not surprised. She'd suspected something like that. She told me she was going to find Catherine, make things right between the families. I begged her not to, told her Anthony was dangerous, that he wouldn't allow it. But Sophia was stubborn. She said some things mattered more than family loyalty, that truth mattered. Lucia's hands twisted the blanket. 2 weeks later, Sophia was dead. You think Anthony killed her, Marcus said, his voice barely controlled. I don't think. I know. Lucia's voice gained strength. Anthony came to see me after the funeral. He said it was a tragedy, a terrible accident. But then he leaned close and whispered, "This is what happens when people dig up the past. Tell anyone what you know, Lucia, and you'll have another accident in the family to mourn." He was threatening me. His own sister. Emma felt rage building in her chest. He murdered Sophia to keep her quiet, to protect a 60-year-old secret. He murdered her to protect the family's power, its reputation. Anthony always believed the organization was more important than any individual life. Lucia reached out, grasping Marcus's hand with surprising strength. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry I never told you. I was afraid. Even after Anthony died, I was afraid of what the others might do. The family has long arms, long memories." Marcus's face was a mask, but Emma could see the muscles working in his jaw, the barely contained fury in his eyes. Who else knows? Who else in the family was aware of what Anthony did? Vincent Castellano knew. Thomas's brother. He died 5 years ago. And Frank Romano, Antonio's nephew, but he's got Alzheimer's now, doesn't remember his own name. Lucia hesitated. But there's one more. Carlo Benedetti. He was Anthony's closest advisor, his consigliere. If Anthony ordered the hit on Sophia, Carlo would have arranged it. He's still alive, still active in the family's affairs. The name fell like a stone. Emma watched Marcus's expression shift from grief to something harder, more dangerous. "Where is Carlo now?" Marcus's voice was deadly calm. "Marcus," Emma said, a warning note in her voice. "Don't do anything." "Where is he?" Marcus repeated, his eyes never leaving Lucia's face. "He runs the concrete business in New Jersey, the legitimate one, or so they claim." Lucia released Marcus's hand. "But Marcus, listen to me. Revenge won't bring Sophia back. It won't undo the past. All it will do is continue the cycle, create more pain, more violence." "She's right," Emma said, standing and moving closer to Marcus. "This is exactly what your grandfather would have done. Met violence with violence. Protected family honor at any cost. You told me you wanted to be different." Marcus stood abruptly, walking to the window, his back rigid. Emma exchanged glances with Lucia, seeing her own concern reflected in the old woman's eyes. "Marcus," Lucia called softly, "let me tell you something about Rosa. After Catherine was gone, after Anthony burned her letter, Rosa spent her last years doing charity work. She volunteered at women's shelters, helped immigrant families, gave money to people who had nothing. She couldn't fix what had been broken with her sister, so she tried to create good in the world wherever she could. That's the legacy she left. Not the violence, not the silence. The attempt to make things better despite the darkness." Marcus turned back, his face raw with emotion. Sophia was trying to do the same thing. She was trying to heal an old wound, bring two families back together, and she died for it. "Yes," Lucia acknowledged, "but what she was trying to do, that was the right thing, the brave thing. Don't let her death be for nothing by becoming the kind of man who would have killed her." The words landed with force. Emma watched Marcus struggle with the truth of them, watched him wrestle with his anger and grief. "What would you have me do?" Marcus asked finally. "Let Carlo Benedetti live out his days in peace? Pretend I don't know he murdered my wife? I'm saying consider what Sophia would want," Lucia said. She believed in truth, in justice, but not revenge. She believed people could be better than their worst actions. Emma moved to stand beside Marcus at the window. Below, the gray water churned, constant and implacable. "There are ways to get justice without becoming like them," she said quietly. "Evidence, the law. Daniel Chen is a thorough investigator. If there's proof of what Anthony ordered, proof of Carlo's involvement." "It was 10 years ago," Marcus interrupted. "Any evidence would be long gone. Destroyed. These people are professionals." "Maybe, but maybe not." Emma turned to Lucia. "Mrs. Romano, did Rosa keep her diary? Does it still exist?" Lucia's eyes widened. "I don't know. After Rosa died, her things went to Gabriella, Sophia's mother. But Gabriella died 8 years ago. Whatever she kept would have gone to her apartment, and that was—" She trailed off, looking at Marcus. "Sold," Marcus finished. "We sold Gabriella's apartment to settle her estate. I remember now. There were boxes of personal items, things Sophia wanted to go through but never had time before." His voice caught. "They're in storage. I couldn't face sorting through them after Sophia died. Just put everything in a climate-controlled unit and tried to forget about it. Then that's where we start. Emma said. If Rosa's diary exists, if there's anything in Sophia's research, any notes or evidence, we find it and we take it to the authorities. We do this the right way. The right way, Marcus repeated bitterly. My grandfather built his empire on corruption. Half the authorities in this city were in his pocket. Then we find the ones who aren't. The FBI, the state attorney general, someone outside the local power structure. Emma's voice was firm. Marcus, you said you wanted to move your family's operations into legitimate business. You can't do that by perpetuating the old ways. You have to break the cycle. Lucia spoke up. The girl is right. And Marcus, there's something else you should know. Sophia was pregnant when she died. 16 weeks, a son. The color drained from Marcus's face. Emma felt her heart break for him, watching this new grief layer on top of the old. I didn't know, Marcus whispered. The autopsy report mentioned it, but I couldn't read the details, couldn't bear it. A son, yes, and if he'd lived, he would have been your heir, the next generation. What kind of world did you want to leave him? One built on lies and violence, or one where truth matters, where justice is possible? Lucia's voice was gentle but implacable. Sophia died, trying to create that better world. Honor her by finishing what she started. The room fell silent except for the distant sound of traffic and the wind against the windows. Emma watched emotions play across Marcus's face. Rage, grief, resignation, and finally, determination. Okay, he said at last. We do this right. We find the evidence, we go to the proper authorities, and we let justice take its course. He looked at Emma. But I need to know, are you prepared for what this might mean? If we expose Carlo Benedetti, if we start unraveling my family's operations, there will be people who want to stop us. Dangerous people. I know, Emma said. I'm not naive about the risks, but my grandmother lived in fear for 40 years, stayed silent to protect her daughters. I won't do the same. This ends with us, Marcus. The silence, the secrets, the cycle of violence, it ends here. He nodded slowly. Then we're agreed. We find Rosa's diary, we build a case, and we see this through. They said their goodbyes to Lucia, promising to return with news. As Mrs. Delgado walked them out, the old woman called after them. Tell Catherine's granddaughter something for me. Tell her Rosa never stopped loving her sister. Every day until she died, Rosa wore that necklace and thought of Catherine. The love was real, always. In the car, driving back toward Manhattan, Marcus and Emma were silent for a long time. The winter landscape passed by. Bare trees, gray sky, the industrial sprawl of New Jersey across the water. I'll call the storage facility, Marcus finally said. We can go tomorrow if you're available. I'll make time. Emma paused, then asked the question that had been nagging at her. Marcus, what will you do if we find proof? If we can actually build a case against Carlo Benedetti for Sophia's murder, I'll take it to the FBI. I have a contact there. Someone who's been trying to build cases against organized crime for years. She's trustworthy. He glanced at Emma. And then I'll step away from my family's business operations. I'll liquidate what I can, donate the proceeds to charity, organizations that help people get out of gangs, that support at-risk youth. I'll use the family wealth to undo some of the damage it caused. That's a big decision. It's the right decision. Should have made it years ago. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. I've been telling myself I was different from my grandfather, that I was cleaning up the family business, but I was still benefiting from wealth built on violence, still protecting the organization because it's all I knew. Sophia's death. If I let that be for nothing, if I don't change, then I'm as guilty as the men who killed her. Emma reached over, placing her hand on his arm. You're not guilty, Marcus. You didn't know. None of this is your fault. Maybe not. But what I do now, that's my choice. That's my responsibility. They reached Manhattan as the early winter darkness was falling, the city lights beginning to twinkle against the purple-gray sky. Marcus drove Emma to her Brooklyn apartment, Vincent following in a separate car as always. Will you be okay tonight? Marcus asked as they idled outside her building. Vincent's man will be watching, but if you want, I can have someone inside. I'll be fine, Emma assured him. I'm meeting my mother for dinner. After that, I'll be home, probably going through more of my grandmother's things. Call me if you need anything, anytime. He hesitated, then added, Emma, thank you for being in this with me. I couldn't do it alone. You're not alone, she said simply. We're in this together. For Catherine and Rosa, for Sophia, for all of them. She climbed out of the car and headed into her building, waving once before the door closed behind her. In her apartment, Emma stood at the window, looking out at the familiar Brooklyn street, seeing one of Vincent's men in a car below. The life she'd lived just a week ago, quiet, predictable, safe, seemed impossibly distant now. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Running late, meet at the restaurant at 7:30? Emma replied affirmatively, then sat down with her grandmother's letter, reading it again. Catherine's words took on new meaning now that Emma understood the full story. Keep the necklace close, Emma. Remember that love and loyalty can exist even in the darkest places. The necklace. Emma pulled out her phone and called Marcus. He answered immediately. Everything okay? The necklace you have. Rosa's necklace. I think we should do something with them, both of them. What do you have in mind? Emma thought of two sisters separated by violence, reunited now through their granddaughter's determination. When this is over, when we've found justice for Sophia and exposed the truth about what happened to my grandfather, I think we should donate them to a museum maybe, or to an organization that helps immigrants. Something that honors what Catherine and Rosa went through, what they lost. I like that, Marcus said softly. Sophia would have liked it too. Good, then that's what we'll do. Emma paused, then added, Marcus, whatever happens tomorrow, whatever we find in that storage unit, we see this through no matter what. No matter what, he agreed. After they hung up, Emma prepared for dinner with her mother, her mind already moving ahead to tomorrow, to the storage unit and whatever secrets it might hold. Rosa's diary could be the key to everything. Proof of Anthony's guilt, evidence of Carlo's involvement, the final pieces of a 60-year-old puzzle, or it could be nothing. Lost, destroyed, misplaced in the chaos of death and estate sales. But Emma had to believe it was there, waiting to be found. Had to believe that truth, after all these years of silence, was finally ready to emerge. She touched her throat where her grandmother's necklace had once rested, feeling its absence like a promise yet to be fulfilled. Soon, she thought, soon Catherine and Rosa's story would be complete. Soon the sisters, separated by violence and lies, would be reunited through the truth their granddaughters had fought so hard to uncover. And maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all this pain. Something that would make the sacrifices, the silence, the years of separation finally mean something more than just loss. That night, Emma dreamed of Ireland, of two young women with identical silver necklaces, standing on a windswept hill, promising to stay sisters forever no matter how far apart life might take them. In the dream, Emma could see their faces clearly, Catherine and Rosa, young and hopeful, before immigration and violence and terrible choices had torn their bond apart. When she woke, it was with tears on her cheeks and a renewed sense of purpose burning in her chest. Today she would honor that promise the sisters had made. Today she and Marcus would take the next step toward justice. Whatever the cost, whatever the danger, the truth would finally come to light.